May I request all guests to kindly take your seats now? We are about to begin. I request my team backstage to also switch on the Facebook Live. May I request everyone to kindly put your cell phones on mute throughout the day to avoid any distractions to the wonderful content that we have for you all today. So good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and Assalamu alaikum. ACCA would like to welcome you to the 5th edition of Pakistan Leadership Conversation. Pakistan Leadership Conversation is ACCA's flagship event, a journey that commenced in 2017, and since then it has become one of the most sought after corporate events of Pakistan. A conference that is known to bring together the most intellectual minds and learned minds together under one roof, industry leaders, corporate leaders, all to discuss our key opportunities and challenges so that we could put forward an actionable roadmap which is imperative for Pakistan's socio-economic growth. I'm also pleased to share with you that we are commencing our insightful and exciting PLC journey this year from the capital city of Pakistan, Islamabad, moving to Karachi on the 22nd of February, and finally on Lahore on 23rd of February. So I would request you all to kindly stay connected over our Facebook for updates regarding our Karachi and Lahore events. So, the main theme for this year's PLC is shaping the future in uncertain times: learn, adopt, and thrive, which means that today we will be having thought provoking conversations on vital themes relevant to the business and economic needs of today, such as climate action, public financial management, our role in development of future ready talent, power of digital, sustainability, ESG, and the importance of ethics and good governance. So, ladies and gentlemen, I am Javeria Malik, Education Relationships Lead for ACCA Pakistan, and I will be your host on today's PLC journey. I would also like to greet we will be joined in a while by Dr. Aisha Ghaus Pasha, State Minister for Finance and Revenue, Government of Pakistan, Muhammad Farooq, Senior Joint Secretary at Ministry of Climate Change, and we're also very pleased to have with us Joseph Owolabi, President of ACCA. So today we are all in the same room as leading policy makers, thought leaders, corporate influencers, representatives from academia and business operators. And we will engage in power-packed, high-octane, future-focused conversations pertinent to the national economic and financial stability along a path of sustainable and inclusive growth. So we will begin with one of the most important items on our agenda, and hence I would like to request to those who can, please rise for the national anthem of Pakistan. Thank you. So, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, and working together is success. And as such, our co organizers, Seed Ventures, and our strategic partners, Bank Islami and the Coca Cola Company, have played an integral part in today's event. Our platinum partners today are Scanza School of Accountancy, U Microfinance Bank Limited, and the Millennium Universal College, and their commitment to furthering today's agenda is commendable. Our gold partners, Adroit Accountics, Obox Accounting, PAC Group of Colleges, Mirchawala Hub of Accountancy, National Clearing Company of Pakistan Limited, the Banis School of Accountancy, National Disaster Risk Management Fund, and Telenor Global Shared Services, we thank you for your support. Our supporting partners, Pakistan Business Council, Pakistan Stock Exchange, Special Technology Zones Authority, PASHA, KP Board of Investment and Trade, the Center of Excellence in Responsible Business, ICMA Pakistan, National Incubation Center, Universal Service Fund, Punjab Board of Investment and Trade, Punjab Information Technology Board, Central Purchase Power Agency, and CFA Society Pakistan have also shown tremendous support for today's event. Our outreach partners, the Centrum Media, and finally our knowledge partners, KPMG and Nutshell Group, thank you for being part of this conference today. So, with all the dignified personalities in this hall, this event deserves the right head start. So, let me invite none other than Head of ACCA Pakistan, Asad Hamid Khan, for the welcome address. He'll be talking about the role of professional accountants in nation building. And Asad, may I request your presence on stage?
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Uh, I heard something. It was not loud enough, and I am sure it's not for me. So, just to liven up the atmosphere, if we could just clap for ourselves again to come this morning. So, a very good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamu alaikum. It's an absolute pleasure to have you all over here. And what better? We are going to be highlighting the role that professional accountants can can contribute in terms of shaping economies, in terms of developing businesses, and in terms of sustainability. That has been at the heart of a very recent times in terms of every conversation. So I'd also like to thank today. So we have already introduced that our president, global president, Joseph Ovalabi has joined us. He has just traveled in. His flight arrived this morning, and he barely had time to join us to start this event. With us, we also have the president of the Institute of Cost and Management Accountants of Pakistan, a strategic partner of ACCA, and a fantastic contributory to developing the accounting profession in Pakistan. Last but not the least, we have with us the first ever uh, office bearer, vice president from Pakistan, from South Asia, representing the ACCA Global Council, Vice President Ayla Majid. So she, just like Joseph Ovalabi, is a fellow member, has contributed immensely in terms of not just developing and supporting the profession, but also being true ambassadors in terms of ensuring that all members get the right support, get the right information so that they're able to bring the role of accountants alive in all the organizations. So coming to the specific topic today. So we are talking about role of professional accountants in nation building. So it may look like a very ambitious topic. It may look like a very ambitious theme, but once you get to know what we as professional accountants do for the organizations, for ourselves, for the community, for businesses, how we help shape policies, we will get to know that how vital is our role, not just for our organizations, but for the larger economic development. So each one of us over here working for organizations as individuals is a unit of that GDP that we measure every year and then we benchmark ourselves in terms of the growth. So moving on, so just wanted to converge ourselves back to the DNA of ACCA. So this is something that we are very proud of in terms of our history, our commitment, and our global community. So if you look at it, ACCA's history is almost 120 years old. If you see, we what we take pride in, we are a force for public good, and our focus is to lead the global accountancy profession by creating opportunities. How do we create opportunities? That is in terms of driving sustainable policies for our organizations, and at the same time, in terms of the role that our students play in terms of, in fact, our learning ecosystem plays, is that we are developing future ready professionals who are able to not just work for any specific sector, but they can contribute to the entire spectrum of the sectors that we have available, from public sector to the private sector, all the way to entrepreneurship. In terms of our commitment, you see, ACCA takes a lot, has committed to 9 out of 17 sustainable development goals, and you would see that all of this aligns around diversity, inequality, climate action, responsible consumption. It talks about partnerships. It talks about gender diversity. And what does ACCA bring, not just to Pakistan, but globally, is almost 800,000 community of members and future members who are not just working for their organizations, but helping shape their societies and communities. So this is something that I want to share, that each year, this is something that we picked up after the first PLC in 2017, that how do we benchmark these conversations every year? How do we bring value through these conversations to the businesses, to ourselves, to ACCA as a contributor to the economy? So we got together this pledge. One of the variables eventually got discontinued, so there was ease of doing business. But now we believe that there has to be a certain ambition that we need to continue to benchmark ourselves and work towards. Average GDP growth, next 5 years. So year on year, we have seen, except the previous year, that we are falling short in terms of the direction that we have taken towards the GDP growth. In terms of climate action, this is something that we have just recently added, and a lot of focus that came after COP27 was the impact that change in climate is going to bring, not just to the respective economies in terms of unprecedented natural calamities, but the impact that it brings onto the economy. So for that benchmark, the ESG, environmental social governance, is a key factor for us, where we are working, and I would share that later, with the wider stakeholders in terms of mainstreaming and creating a roadmap for Pakistan. Global competitiveness, another benchmark where we rank very low. There was a slight improvement, but since then we have not seen any improvement. And if you link it with all the other indices, whether we talk about the Human Development Index, whether we talk about the uh, the gender parity index, so you would see that ACCA, that Pakistan is lagging behind, and that is why ACCA wishes to highlight that any policy, any effort that we make in any direction, it has to hit the competitiveness for Pakistan businesses, And why is that? Because we are talking about a financial situation for the government where we are challenged for forex reserves. So it cannot be alone dealt through exports or remittances. You need foreign direct investment, and you need sustained foreign direct investment. And we have with us today the ex-chairman, KP Board of Investment and Trade, who will be joining us later for a conversation. So you've already mentioned our commitment to 9 of the 17 sustainable UN SDGs. So just to share with you in terms of our focus on the themes today. So why we chose shaping uh, 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 economies? Why did we choose or pick up on uncertain times? So this is to just highlight that even these times bring opportunity, even these times create positivity in terms of us realigning ourselves, whether we are an organization, whether we are a government, whether we are as individuals. How do we reconfigure our respective focus, whether that is in terms of income generation, whether it is in terms of our spending, whether that is capital or whether that is operating, and how we are able to manage our finances to the most optimal way so that we not just sustain but are able to also thrive going forward. So you would see that at the heart of the conversations would be the readiness of our professionals for future challenges, to be able to think ahead, to be able to know exactly what the trends are leading towards and what we need to do as individuals to skill up or as organizations to plan and shift towards the changing paradigms. Uh, so I may not be able to see the screen now, so I have to refer to my paper because of the camera activity that you can see. So these are certain agendas that we had thought would resonate with the larger pillars of how the economy is shaping or has been working in the recent years. So the first pillar revolves around ethics and governance, and you would see that we have painted our progress as amber. We thought that we were moving into green until last year, but we found that the policies that were implemented during the recent 7 to 8 months created a situation where the friendliness, the ease of the taxation and the foreign exchange regulations again had to be deferred. So it is uh, something that we would continue to work together with our stakeholders to ensure that businesses are facilitated, are enabled. So I think right now we talk about a lot of focus for the governments, but to me the key focus for any government at the moment is to enable. So they have to be the chief enabler for the stakeholders in Pakistan. Then, in terms of public financial management, we see that there's a lot of vision put into place, not just by the respective ministries, but all the institutions that are supporting the respective governments, whether we talk about the Controller General of Accounts, the Auditor General of Pakistan, we talk about the public sector entities, we talk about the respective provincial governments. So there is a huge behind the scenes public financial management transformation going on, which requires or which aims at further professionalizing the public sector, especially the public sector financial professionals. The focus is to ensure that you have enhanced fiscal transparency, which leads to greater trust, and that trust is both with the citizens, whether they are corporate or whether they are natural. Then, in terms of climate action, pleased to share with you and on environmental social governance that very active work has started happening at the regulatory front, at the government front. So today we'll have a conversation later today on the National Adaptation Plan. We have the Ministry of Climate Change, which is leading this particular initiative, sharing how the entire integrated framework is being put together so that our vulnerabilities are addressed. Then when we talk about the regulators, they've already put in place this framework, which is called the Environmental Social Governance Framework, starting with the banking sector. So they have a 2-year roadmap for voluntary compliance, followed by the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan, which has put together a roadmap which starts with first awareness, then advocacy, and then comes customized implementation through a roadmap which is differentiated by each sectoral need. and at the same time, they're enabling the Pakistan Stock Exchange in terms of developing an index which is uh, built upon ESG-friendly entities. Last but not the least, I would touch upon. So you would see CPEC and BRI at the end. So there was a lot of activity happening on it until 2 to 3 years back. Now we see it shaping up again in terms of its phase two. In phase one, we saw a lot of focus in terms of port development, in terms of power, and that ended up creating a situation where we were net power, uh, 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 in fact, favorable. So historically, we were challenged for power generation. So when you look at the shared services, so this is one area where we continue to see opportunities. So whether you talk with the big four, whether you talk with the IT companies, whether you speak to big multinational corporations that are now setting up their back offices in Pakistan, whether it is finance, whether it is IT, whether it is reporting, financial reporting, whether it is HR. So this is one area which I would urge all of you to continue to look and see going forward, as it has the potential to be a major contributor to Pakistan's exports going forward, which as a mix needs to change from goods to services. So I'll just stop over here, and I will be sharing with you this slide. So I thought that I'll share it with you in narration so you can just have a look at it. And then this is something you can, again, when we meet next year, hold us accountable, and we can continue to have a conversation of where we stand today and where we would stand in January or February 2024. So before I close, I'll just urge everyone that ACCA globally invests a lot in terms of bringing out policy and insights. These put together the trends that impact economies, that impact businesses, and obviously impact the accountancy profession, and how the accountancy profession and the changes that are happening with the profession can enable the respective businesses. So on your tables, you would have your programs, and you can use respective QR codes to actually reach out to these respective applications. So thank you once again. And with this, I'll hand it over to Javeria. Have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asid, for reminding us of our accountabilities, for talking about accountabilities. ACCA members present in this hall today and those joining us online on Facebook, remember our pledge to sustainable Pakistan, GDP increase in 5 years, 7% plus, contribution to climate action and ESG, global competitive index less than 50, and commitment to 9 out of 17 UN SDGs. So thank you very much, Asid, once again. And now, ladies and gentlemen, joining us today all the way from Australia is ACCA's President, Joseph Owolabi, who has joined us this morning only. You must be tired, Joseph, but here we are with an action-packed week. So he'll be delivering a keynote speech on accounting for a better world, business and government. So please join me in welcoming Joseph to Pakistan and on this stage this morning. Thank you.
Good morning to you all. Assalamu alaikum. It is a pleasure to be with you. It's my first time in Pakistan. You pardon me for taking so long to come here, but I'm excited to be with you today. And I'll go into my speech, but I'm just overjoyed, and thank you to our partners from the Institute and all the partners that work with ACCA here in Pakistan to create the accounting profession that the world truly needs. So I'll first want to tell you a bit about myself. I'm honored to be representing 750,000 current and future accountants in 178 countries. That gives you a sense of ACCA's relevance as well as our reach. But today I feel a personal bond with the people of Pakistan. Sometimes last year, my home country, I'm originally from Nigeria, suffered devastating floods in an area called Niger Delta. It's a oil-rich south-south region. The river Niger busted banks, and over 100,000 homes were lost from that single event. 1.5 million people were displaced. On record, 600 people drowned. As the world was grappling with that, we're caught in the disaster that also engulfed here in Pakistan, where floods triggered by melting glaciers and monsoon rains caused a lot of our communities here to be washed. We still don't know the total cost of that disaster, but on record, about 1,500 people died from that. One common thread between both disasters, the one I talked about in Nigeria and the one your people experienced here, apart from the sheer scale of the human tragedy and the common suffering that our people went through, we all knew that could happen. So it wasn't a surprise, it wasn't a coincidence. Perhaps we might not know precisely when those events would happen or exactly where they would occur. However, the whole world knows that more extreme and even deadlier weather catastrophes are on their way. And this is caused by climate change, human-induced climate change. So this is not another speech about climate change, and you're wondering, what are we doing today? And this isn't a speech about how the future is hopeless. This message has nothing to do with either of those. My message is simple, and it is that climate change is the most visible danger in a wider threat to a sustainable world. My message is that there's a symptom to a broader array of issues to do with how we consume resources in the world, how you and I run our businesses, and how we grow our economies. Of course, this is a debate that matters enormously to countries such as Pakistan. We create just a fraction of the world's greenhouse gas emissions, but the deadly consequences are ours to deal with. It is also enormously important in a country such as this, which is outside of what you would call the circle of richest nations, where the people's living standards, access to education, and a safe and secure future lag behind what we experience here. My message is that all of us, business leaders, politicians, people of influence in our communities, can play a role in protecting and ensuring that we have a more sustainable way of doing business. It's about choosing a different way of keeping score in commerce that uses a wide set of principles than the black and white basics of profit and loss that we're used to in accounting and finance. This new approach should weigh the business impact on society and the environment in our balance sheet and our annual reports, along with the cost and revenue as we do today. I said earlier that my statement and message today is one of hope, and that is true. I know it's easier to throw our hands in the air in despair at the troubles ailing the world at large and conclude that there's nothing one person, or indeed your business, or even a country can do to turn back the tides of the sea of troubles. But in my view, even though one person may not be able to do everything, but everyone can do something. For us at ACCA, I will make our practical contribution as accountants and as ethically motivated leaders of business is summed up in our current theme, which we call accounting for a better world. This is so important to us, and it says so much about our members here in Pakistan, but more importantly, around the world, play their part in building a better, more sustainable world for their people and indeed the world at large. The theme helps us tell a powerful story of how the accountancy profession benefits societies and economies, and how it responds to the many challenges facing the world today. In this changing and uncertain environment, we need to ensure, as an accounting profession, that we remain relevant. And to show that we are indeed relevant, we need to position our profession right at the heart of issues such as sustainability, inclusion, ethics, and the increasing desire of individuals and societies around the world to change life for the better in the face of what we've seen with COVID-19 pandemic. There's also been a lot of attention around geopolitical issues and some of the issues that we've talked about earlier. Our Accounting for the World, for a Better World agenda breaks these issues down into 7 priorities. And I'll talk about how the 7 priorities are even more important for us here in Pakistan. They include building resilient economies, developing the talent of the future, driving sustainable business, advancing standards and regulations, transforming the public sector, supporting entrepreneurial growth, and strengthening ethics and trust. Earlier, I used the word practical, and that's so important because ACCA is deeply a pragmatic organization. As accountants, we're used to measure results, outcomes, and more importantly, we focus on that than intentions. So our events today must mean more to us than just a talk or an excuse. It's a real chance to engage with business leaders and shapers of public policy on the big conversations of our time. We all know that societal expectations of businesses, of governments, and policymakers have shifted. We've seen that around the world. Now, more than ever before, there is a demand that we look forward and consider our responsibility, not just to this generation, but to future generations, to make a better, fairer world that works for everyone. To reset for sustainable growth and shape a new relationship between business, policymakers, the public sector, and wider society, picking the lessons that we can pick from past few years and embracing the positives. ACCA believes that accountants are better placed to play a major role in this shift as dedicated professionals with the skills, professional experience, as well as the knowledge that transcends sectors and borders and influence that touches all aspects of society. As I mentioned earlier, the Accounting for a Better World agenda is especially relevant here in Pakistan. We are seeing the ESG issues, that's the environmental, social, and governance issues, enter the mainstream of politics and business thinking here, where a generation ago, they were barely even a fringe of by the extraordinary demands of the pandemic, which resulted in massive public response. We're seeing innovation supporting entrepreneurial growth by the extraordinary demands that we see from our young people who are now becoming business leaders with a vision to make an impact in the world. In Pakistan, ACCA is so proud that we're playing our part in shaping this exciting future. The biggest way we do this is by extending the chance of a professional career to thousands of people. The values, the purpose for which ACCA is based, and those values are innovation, inclusion, and integrity. They flourish here in Pakistan. I'll share with you a great story and an inspiring one at that. Students and future accountants here in Pakistan are among the most enthusiastic followers of remote learning anywhere in the world. We've seen that this innovative approach to education has accelerated throughout the pandemic, when ACCA kept the path to the qualification, even when exam centers, colleges, and universities around the world were closed. Distance study and online exams have given the chance of advanced finance and business study to many people who were excluded. And more importantly, this includes women and those that were in remote areas. ACC has unearthed the power of digital education to make the tyranny of geographical issues obsolete. And it's opening up a new world of opportunities for people of talent, ambition, and integrity to thrive in a professional life here in Pakistan. The word innovation is key. And the people here in Pakistan show a rare genius in using digital technology to make lives better. Educational technology, which is commonly called EdTech, offers easier way of pursuing education at every level. Learning activities, tuition, group learnings, lectures, all of this, as well as assessments and education. The point is this: the huge EdTech arena is something for everyone. No one is excluded. Of course, this is a powerful example of one application of technology allied with the wheel of making a difference and having a positive change in the world. But there are many other examples. And this is one of a bigger picture that I mentioned earlier. The question now is, how do we together create a sustainable way of doing business that protects the habitability of our planet through to the middle of this century and beyond? Increasingly, this has become a commercial question, not just an ethical or moral question. It's a question of risk. We now know that more and more businesses find that they will be punished in the marketplace, capital markets, private investors, what have you, private equity, venture capitalists, if they cannot show long-term commitment to sustainability. People won't work for them. Consumers won't trade with them. Investors will not back them. These are the truths. And it shines a bright spotlight on the urgent necessity for a more sustainable way of running our economic affairs. And this is only the future. And it makes sense to all of us here in Pakistan, across the planet. And it falls on you and I, as business leaders, finance professionals, entrepreneurs, regulators, and policymakers, to answer the call of the times and play our part in making this a brighter future. I want to thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for that excellent and passionate talk. It's a good wake-up call for all of us, human-induced climate change, how we are contributing to the economies, running our businesses. Are we as sustainable as the situation demands us to be and our businesses to be? And you very rightly said that one person cannot do everything, but everyone can do something that can make a difference. So thank you once again, Joseph, for being in Pakistan. We're truly humbled to have you, and we hope that you enjoy our hospitality for the rest of the week. And this sets the perfect ground for our next session, as it is centered around the very important topic of the National Adaptation Plan, building resilience, reducing vulnerabilities, as Pakistan has officially begun the process of creating a national plan for building resilience to climate change. The announcement came only 6 weeks before the nation hosts the landmark World Environment Day on June 5th this year. So, to deliver the keynote address for this discussion, we have with us today none other than Mohammed Farooq, who's the Senior Joint Secretary from Ministry for Climate Change. Mr. Farooq has played a leading role in developing and implementing the National Adaptation Plan for Pakistan, as this plan aims to build the country's resilience to the impacts of climate change by identifying and addressing key vulnerabilities across sectors. With his wealth of experience and expertise, our guest will be sharing valuable insights on this critical issue. Please join me in welcoming Mohammed Farooq, Senior Joint Secretary, Ministry for Climate Change. Round of applause.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much for inviting me to this a very good session. Gratitude must always be implicit, and I'll share my explicit appreciation as I close. Again, thank you very much. Hope this will serve our cause, the National Adaptation Plan cause, which we want to integrate into the whole system of governance. Over the past few years, seriously, we have seen unprecedented weather pattern, which is erratic and horrible. The recent flood is one of those. And in fact, that was not a flood. That was not, a climate change type of scenario. It was a climate carnage, making landfill in a country which has less than 1% of the global GHG emission, almost no footprint vis-a-vis the global GHG emission. And that was perhaps the most important event which make us believe that until and unless we have this adaptation plan for the whole country, these climate events would recur with the same ferocity, with the same intensity. We already started our planning, our work on the National Adaptation Plan around a year back. And the main challenge which we faced during this process was the unavailability of the data with us. We had no risk and vulnerability assessment as yet in Pakistan. So we relied upon the World Bank, ADB, and the UNESCAPE data, which is for the whole world and for the regions. So from that, we downscaled the metrics, and then on the basis of those, we did our climate projection on the basis of climate simulation models. And believe you me, if the business as usual continues, Pakistan will suffer more such events, rather more frequently and with more intensity. And those projections have shown us on the basis of RCP and ACSP both that for Pakistan, if the business as usual continue, the projection is more severe as compared to the global. I mean, in Pakistan, we would be witnessing and experience more such erratic behavior of the weather than the rest of the world. And exactly the recent flood has shown us that. On the basis of those climate projection scenario, we then identified 8 most vulnerable sectors of the economy due to the climate change, which include agriculture, water, human health, urban resilience, forestry, so on and so forth. These are 8 most vulnerable sectors. Then we sat with the experts for each sector and come up with a short-term, medium-term, and long-term plan. The issue is we did all this, but then how to measure those climate sector vulnerabilities vis-a-vis the progress which we would be making hopefully in the coming years. And for those, again, we develop indicators. For agriculture, we have developed around 32 indicators. For water sector, it is around 36. For the rest of the sector, we are going for these indicators, which will show us the progress on each sectors. The next big issue in Pakistan is institutional role. And until and unless we integrate these adaptation measures and the recommendation which we have in each and every sector of the economy, nothing is going to happen. So this is now the biggest challenge which we are facing in the Ministry of Climate Change. How to integrate the adaptation measure with the planning processes, with the even legal system, with the institutional framework, and with the processes and plans, the development plan. At the federal level, we have somewhat adaptation measure in our planning process, like the EIA is there. That those are not sufficient, but still, at least we have some sort of risk assessment over there. The Achilles heel of our system is at the local level, provincial, district, and tehsil. The most important one are at tehsil level. And until and unless we address those gaps at the lowest level, where the actual development work is carried out as far as climate vulnerability and risk assessment is concerned, I think Pakistan will see more such devastation in the future. After the institutional arrangement, and this is how we want to do it, that every sector of the economy, every ministry, every department which are involved in the planning and the development processes, there must be a climate risk assessment. The issue with us is that, as I have mentioned, we have no data with us. NDMA has come up with a data of around 10 to 20 districts, but again, that is not enough for us. So until and unless we have risk assessment for every sector of the economy, we are not moving forward in the adaptation plan processes. So we want every ministry to have a separate adaptation cell. Similarly, at the provincial level, we are also working with them that they establish an adaptation cell not only at the provincial and district level, but at the tehsil level, so that the adaptation activities are carried out based on the risk and vulnerability assessment of this whole thing. In the ministry, we have developed this adaptation plan, but next big issue is financing those plans. And again, we are looking, no doubt, to the international donor and to the UN agencies, but still we want the private sector to play a big role in this. And recently we have initiated a process of Living Indus initiative for Pakistan. This comprised 25 intervention. Again, this is an adaptation plan for the Pakistan vis-a-vis water sector. And we have included 25 intervention in those. Now we want to create model for each of the intervention to be emulated, replicated by the private sector, because the private sector plays a big part in the developing processes and plan. Similarly, recently we have invited the executive director of the UNEP, and she came over here after this flood, and she spent around 4 or 5 days and met with the Prime Minister. We requested her for this adaptation plan process and this Living Indus initiative of the Pakistan. And thanks that she has committed $25 million that we will be getting for preparing ourselves for implementing the adaptation plan in Pakistan. So this is a positive sign from the Ministry of the Climate Change. The issue is adaptation is a big challenge in Pakistan. And there are many issues and challenges involved in implementing the adaptation plan. We have a plan with us. We are taking it to the cabinet and hopefully it will be approved. But the big issue would be implementing that plan in Pakistan. We are spearheading this whole process and we hope that we would be able to implement this adaptation plan in Pakistan. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Farooq Saab, for sharing with us some details around the groundwork that is being done around the National Adaptation Plan and the challenges surrounding the same and the role private organizations in Pakistan can play to support the overall objective. And as all our dignified speakers so far have established the importance and urgency of the subject matter, we need to discuss this in more detail. And we are pleased to share with you that our first panel discussion of the day is focused on this subject matter. So I would like to call Sajid Aslam, Regional Lead Public Affairs for Asia Pacific, ACCA. So ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome our moderator on the stage. Pleased to share that Sajid is very passionate about this subject. So there could be no better person than him to moderate this discussion. And I'm also very excited for this panel discussion as our esteemed panelists include Ayla Majid. She's the Vice President of ACCA Global. And I think, Asid can correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time that we have both president and vice president both in one hall from ACCA today in Pakistan. And Ayla is also leading financial and business, is a leading financial and business advisor with expertise in project structuring, capital raising, privatization, mergers and acquisition in emerging markets. She is also an internationally acclaimed professional and a strong advocate of the UN SDGs. So in your round of applause, Ayla, please may I request you to join us on the stage. Also in the panel, we have Dr. Hassan Dawood Butt, who is a seasoned projects management and investment specialist. He has worked with international organizations, including IFC and the World Bank, on setting up EODB cells and facilitation centers and articulating 5-year investment strategies for KP. Dr. Butt was previously the CEO of KPBOIT and Pakistan and Special Economic Zone Authority, and was the project director coordinator for CPAC. He's an associate professor at Bahria University and has a PhD in management sciences. Dr. Butt has joined SDPI as a senior advisor with a focus on Chinese projects, CPAC, blue economy, and new initiatives. Wonderful to have you with us, sir. So please join us on stage. Also, we are very pleased to have with us Shehzad Ahmed Malik, who's the president of ICMA and CEO of SMNCO, with over 25 years of professional experience, including 17 years in the practice of CMA. He has served as Vice President, Honorary Secretary, and Chairman, Islamabad Branch Council of ICMA, and is a board member of SAFA and its Committee on Education, CPD, and Training. Mr. Malik also represents ICMA as a member of Members Development Committee of Confederation of Asia and Pacific Accountants, and is the chairman of the Taxation Committee of Rawalpindi Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has previously worked as Finance Director, CFO at the Islamabad Electric Supply Company and Army Welfare Trust, and as a member of the Tax Reforms Committee of the Ministry of Finance. So Sir Shehzad Ahmed Malik, please join us on stage. Also joining us in this panel discussion is Dr. Abid Qayyum Suleri, who has been the head of the Sustainable Development Policy Institute since 2007. He's a member of various policy-making forums and advisory boards, including the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, the Pakistan Climate Change Council, and the National Advisory Committee of the Planning Commission of Pakistan. He has also served on the board of directors of the National Disaster Risk Mitigation Fund and on several other committees and councils formed by the government. Thank you very much, Dr. Abid Qayyum, for joining us. And we have with us Bilal Anwar, who is an experienced international climate policy and sustainable development professional with a career spanning over 2 decades. He currently serves as the CEO of the National Disaster Risk Management Fund, where he manages the federal government fund and investments on projects for disaster risk reduction activities against natural disasters and climate induced risks. So it's a wonderful panel that we have today. And over to you, Sujit. Um, just want to mention that we would be having a 15-minute Q&A post the discussion with the panelists. So you will have the opportunity to ask any questions that you will have for the panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Javeria. Assalamu alaikum. Guys, it's an important topic. So, assalamu alaikum. So, welcome to the topic. I think we will be hearing a lot of terminologies here. So, let's try to first get those out of the way. So, we will be talking about mitigation. Those are the acts which we have to do to make sure the climate impact can be reduced. Like decarbonization is one of our mitigation. Then we will be talking about adaptation, the plans that how we will redefine our life, businesses, living style, behaviors to make sure whatever the changes are coming, how we're going to live with that. We will use the term resilience, climate resilience, which will be referring to our ability to respond and bounce back if something goes wrong, or we should get ready for that. And if something has happened, so we can reduce the damages which it can cause, right? So like Farooq Saab has set up a very good basis for us. When we talk about NDC or National Adaptation Plan or nationally determined contribution, those are the key bases as a country, as a nation, or in some cases, if we look at ASEAN as a Asia Pacific, one of the part within the Asia Pacific as a region, they have a certain commitments, and those commitments generate those priorities or set those priorities that where to focus. It's such a vast subject that when Farooq said that we have already identified 25 priorities, so that itself is one of a significant achievement just to find out what the priorities are. Just like in any economic plan for a country, that help us in the businesses, in the education sector, in the industrialization, that where to focus and what kind of incentive and what kind of future outlook is available. Similarly, national adaptation plans and NDC and national adaptation plan for specifically, but even the NDC set the targets, the direction of journey for the organization where to look at and how they can contribute. It's such a big area that as an individual, as a household, as a municipalities, as a nation, as a business corporation, everybody need to play their part to make a difference. Individually or by a single entity, we cannot see that difference, or nobody can do much around it, but together we can. So the key message is here from a national adaptation plan, why it's important, because it set the priority for the countries, and the rest of the organization or institutions and entity really align themselves for that priority, and that create a difference. So this alignment is important, and that's the importance of the national adaptation plan and the awareness of that national adaptation plan. So I think these are the key themes which we will be picking up, and then like Javeria mentioned, we will come up with to you for some questions there as well. So I think we will start with Bilal, and we already agreed all the tough questions will go to Bilal. So Bilal, just looking at your organization, which is specifically set for that disaster and risk management side, how do you see your role or our organizational role in shaping the national adaptation plan or contributing towards the NDCs, and where we stand in that contribution or a progress as we speak today?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Sajid. Indeed, a tough question, and the question become even more tougher in uncertain challenges and the time which we are passing through. In the specific context of adaptation, the new international research and the findings, especially arising out of the IPCC, which is basically showing us that we have reached to that level of climatic changes where adaptation or our capacity to adapt has its own inherent limitations as well. So I think this is the challenge. This is the intensity of the challenge, the gravity of the issue which we are talking about. Farouk Saab mentioned it very well, that the priorities, and I think the priorities in Pakistan, especially the critical sectors and the vulnerable sectors, they has been kind of identified. So which basically gives us a fundamental framework where to focus. I think the challenge comes how to focus and how to muster, how to gather the institutional support and the financing, of course, which is required. Just to further galvanize the situation, I think we don't have. I mean, we have the numbers in NDC. Globally, when we're talking about on the kind of a comparable countries, we're talking about especially on the adaptation side, the financing gaps actually runs into trillions of dollars per year. So this is it's a huge challenge. It's which we have to deal with it. Now, I think in the specific context of NDRMF, um, our role is very specific, very focused. We have this very broad mandate for developing resilience Pakistan, and as you mentioned, and clarify the what resilience means in a very broad sense as well. In that context, we basically invest and we provide the financing for the different kind of interventions in disaster risk reduction areas and disaster risk financing and climate change adaptation. So our role is, and we are very keenly and patiently actually looking and seeing the development of the National Adaptation Plan and align ourselves in terms of the key sectors and the vulnerable sectors where we can focus and we can prioritize our interventions and the project development work which we can do from our institution. I think we can based on the expertise and the institutional knowledge which we have generated over the last few years in NDRMF, we can provide those kind of expertise in terms of designing and refining the projects to focus on very critical areas and very critical regions, and which is absolutely needed given the resource constraint which we have. I think one point I want to really I would like to highlight, and I'm sure my other colleagues are going to support me on that as well. I think, and I'm sure this is going to be incorporated in the development of the adaptation plan as well. Now, we know about the sectors. We know about the agriculture, the water, health, and several other sectors which are critical. I think when it comes to the practicalities of things, and the ACCA president very rightly said, and this is the right forum to actually formulate as well. It has to be practical. It has to be implementable, and so we have to see the regions as well. We have to see the communities as well, which are vulnerable, which are particularly vulnerable, or who have lost their capacity and economic livelihood. So the adaptation plan has to be broad, has to be flexible, because we are indeed in changing and uncertain times. So the country cannot afford to come up with another adaptation plan in few years' time, and it should not. Any policy which is revised and plans of such a broad strategic nature, which begs revision frequently, that means that wasn't actually designed in a proper and comprehensive manner. So I think a number of areas has to come together and has to come together in an integrated manner. And we in NDRMF actually can provide that kind of support, and we're very much looking forward to align and focus our investments to those areas.
Yeah, thank you, Bilal. Thank you. I think that's a very right point. We have to get it right, and we have to get it right first time, or at least reasonably. We should set our direction and should not keep changing that. It's a very costly affair in terms of money and lives as well. So that's a key issue. Dr. Sab, Dr. Abid Sab, SDPI is one of a key leading think tank which is guiding governments on a different areas and agenda. And when we look at the National Adaptation Plan, or NDC, so what role SDPI is playing, number one, and what is the best practice or learning we can bring from the other countries who have already developed or they have progressed in terms of their national adaptation planning?
Well, thank you. First, in a layperson language, mitigation is cure and adaptation is prevention. And as a nation, we try to go for cure. We try not to listen to the preventive measures. For the last 20 years, my physician has been telling me for a morning walk, which I'm not. And he keeps on warning me that one day you will end up in cardiac ward, and only then you will start your physical activity. So we are not actually giving any importance to adaptation, be it adaptation in our lives, day-to-day lives, or adaptation to climate change. Now, when we talk of adaptation, we talk of mitigation, or we talk of any other climate change policy, the implementation has to be at local level. So we can have excellent policy at federal level. We can have salve of policies at a provincial level, but where it matters the most is local level, and I think that is a missing link. And organizations like Sustainable Development Policy Institute and many others, I think we can try to fill in a gap between federal level policymakers, provincial level policymakers, vis-a-vis where those policies have to be implemented, creating awareness, sensitizing the needs of local communities vis-a-vis their financing needs. So one of the best strategies for invoking resilience is strengthening local communities. They are the better judge. They know how to cope against the vagaries of climate change. So all one needs to do, instead of going to them and giving them a prescription, we need to understand their coping strategies and strengthen those coping strategies by way of policy measures and by way of financing. And I think that's where civil society organizations and research organizations like STPI, they can play their role, and we have been playing their role. And finally, National Adaptation Plan for Pakistan is Indus Basin Restoration. So River Indus, actually, it tells us how climate change is affecting our economies, how it is affecting our environment, how it's affecting our day-to-day life, availability of water, lack of availability of water, floods, drought seasons, agriculture, economy. So everything can be gauged through Indus River Basin. So for me, adaptation is restoration of Indus Basin, and that, again, I will repeat that can only be done through involvement of local governments and local communities, and the local civil society organizations. And STPI is always trying to play its part at all levels, starting from local to a macro level, that is national policy building.
Now, thank you, Dr. Saab. I think that's, again, a point which I think Farooq Saab raised, Bilal Saab raised, is the local community, how we engage with them and how they really provide a feedback, and how we provide them or enable them or empower them to really implement those changes or adaptation plan. So Shehzad Saab, that brings me to your side as an institute, which practically working on a cost and management side, and you have got a lot of members who are working in a public sector and a private sector. So what you are hearing back in terms of the feedback on climate action, how they are contributing, how institution is contributing, and how the members are contributing there?
It's all. Thank you, Caesar. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, the accounting profession is not only nowadays for a bookkeeping and other, the accountancy profession now as a global, you should lead as a commitment and demonstrating their commitment to the environmental and encouraging the whole system and also the clients for to do so. And also the business, they can support the business to ensure their sustainability and initiative are strategic rather than tactical nature. And in the same lines, these bodies can help to the regulators, and also to the policymakers, and who are doing shape for the future, and also this climate change, to make them, with the help of their expertise, for the decision making. And as Secretary Saab said, they have some shortage of data and other things. And here I must say that we should, as an expert, and join our hands and should support them in these lack of data and other things, and help them to further accurate information. Then can help to make the decision, which is the actual gap where normally decisions can be made, but the practicality and its implementation, which is also said in speech, and implementation is very much important. And here as professionals, we are already supporting, we are suggesting them in the different avenues. Either it's a climate change issue, either it's a economic factor, either taxation, and other our expertise. We are giving them our suggestions. We are also supporting them in the different ways, and as Mr. Joseph said, and no one can do, and we can as a merger, and we can work for the development of the profession. And this as a village, people are in a knowledge, and they can work with join their hands and work with supportive way, and to the government, all regulators, and all the stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you, Shazad. Thank you very much. I think that's well said. That a lot of organizations have collaborate, really deliver value there, and that's a strength to reach your side. You worked a lot with China. You have headed the investment bureau in KK as well. You worked a lot in economic zones. So when we look from China side, who is one of a key contributor or at a very high risk once it's come to the carbon emission and their initiative around the decarbonization. So how you see them implementing these kind of initiative in the industry side or a business side to start with, and then at a government level?
Thank you very much, and I think I must congratulate you, and I think the management of ACCA. The worst thing that can happen to Islamabad due to climate change is that it has shortened our spring and our autumn. And your team has been, and the team of ACCA has been able to find time, get us all together at the setting up of spring. So I think this spring and the ideas that we discussed today perhaps will take us and usher us into good times, and I believe that. And I congratulate your president who's been here and looking at things as you move to various other parts of Pakistan. You'll see the kind of quest that we are in terms of climate change and ESG. But coming back to your question, I think I would start with an old Chinese quote. It's about 5,000 years quote, and I'm glad that you've referred to China. They say in order to attract a phoenix, you have to build the nest first. And the other thing that Deng Xiaoping said, that it does not matter whether the cat is black or white as long as it catches the mice. I think these two fundamental thoughts are my area on which I take various aspects in terms of environment and how we should shape our future. I think China is now understanding the importance as global leader, the importance that it has to give, and the amount of support that it has to provide to countries like Pakistan in terms of building our capacities for understanding the quid pro quo between the environment and the economy. I think now we cannot have policies, economic and financial policies made without actually embracing the concept of climate change, and without not ensuring practical measures through which all aspects from environment to governance of ESG are incorporated in our policy making. And this is what China is doing. China, if you look at Chinese culture, besides being very introvert, what they conserve the natural resources, and that's part of their society. They conserve water. When they start their day, they put water in a bucket and use it for whole of the day, whether they are rich or whether they are not so rich. And this is perhaps this concept builds in the society, and us for us also, which is under tremendous challenge because of the climate change. The vulnerable class is growing, the poverty is growing because of this. I think we should first of all, at our homes, and I'm wearing my academian's cap now and talking as a professor of a university. I think in our homes we must build the capacity of our youngsters to conserve our resources. I worked in KP for last almost 4 years, and my biggest challenge in terms of investment in the mining sector is the waste that we make. Huge potential, but wasting most of it, and exporting them in raw form and perhaps not using the aspect. And the other thing, I think again, taking my ideas and concepts from Chinese perhaps, is the concept of green accounting, and how this is important for the future of youngsters who are sitting here, and of course not so young sitting here, is in terms of understanding whatever financial decisions you make, whatever money you save and put in your banks, if you are not aware of the challenge that environment is bringing, if you're not incorporating them in your policy making, if you're not telling to your CEOs, and if you are the CEO, not telling to your teams that why it's environment and the governance so important, then you're failing as part of larger community that we live in. The bitter politics is actually bringing globalization under a lot of stress. Globalization helped take people out of poverty, but now, since we are now moving into an era in a post-COVID phase where even moving and traveling is becoming a challenge, I think uh, communities which ACCA represent, and the people and the thought group that ACCA and perhaps SGPI represent, I think you need to be more vocal, as they do in China. I think you have to reach out in universities, you have to reach out to business enterprises, big and small, and tell them the importance, and even the government. I think the government is as a matter of work, yes, they are understanding, but as a matter of principle, as a matter of poverty alleviation, because the challenge between environment, economy, poverty alleviation, SDPR, SDGs, and all the other aspects that we are discussing in terms of sustainability of our great country, I think they converge and they should converge. That last point I just would like to highlight. Sometimes we read a lot on why nations fail. I think we should also read Ray Dalio's book on why nations succeed. And in that, he's only spoken about how, by looking at their resources, uh, saving your resources, building better governance, building inclusive development, and looking at environment can save your country, and let us face the headwind and bring a better prosperous Pakistan. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you picked up that on the awareness side of it. I think as a primary agenda where we should start from. So great, that one. And you also picked up on an interesting area where we were having debate, GDP versus the Human Development Index. So where we should be focusing first, it's a GDP or HDI, which leads to what, and then can we do both at the same time? So I think there are a lot of areas and a lot of concepts which have been challenged in the recent past. And that's bring me to you, Ayla, you being representing ACCA globally, very well traveled. Sustainability is one of your core area, and some of the areas you are very advanced as compared to the rest of the world or individuals or a professional. So how you see, number one, the National Adaptation Plan, and uh, what about the key initiatives you are seeing in the other countries which are taking place and defining their roadmap for the future?
Ji, thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum and good morning, everyone. Joseph, huge welcome to Pakistan, and I hope you have an incredible week. When we talk about sustainability, or when we talk about the economic development, the strategic plans, anything, it needs to be looked at from a holistic lens of not just one sector, not just one challenge, but looking at the availability of resources, the dynamics that we are in, and also the challenges that we have, and then looking at an overarching plan which is cross-sectoral, which is looking at many interventions, which is looking at lots of different kind of stakeholder engagements as well. So I would say starting from, say, a holistic plan, making that, I think that is extremely important. Sustainability conversation, the climate change conversation has been happening for years and years. It's just that that is now more augmented, or now it is front and center. Uh, these things were known to people. The data was already there. It's just that the more that the natural disasters are hitting, more people have started to sort of talk about it. When we talk about in context of Pakistan, I think one of the earlier comments made was that we are not, we do not, we perhaps have one of the lowest sort of emitting countries. But in terms of the proportionate disadvantage that we have in terms of all the disasters that have been hit, that is completely out of proportion. But that is nature. We cannot do much about that. But what we could have done is to build climate resilient infrastructure. And this is something we need to show ourselves a mirror. We have unfortunately not done that. Many countries have not done that. And this is where we should now work on really a war footing. Sajid, you mentioned about what's happening around the world, around the region, etc. Energy transition, sustainability, these are areas I work very extensively in. So different countries are looking at from, again, a holistic point of view, how they are using their resources, how they are implementing the concept of circular economy, how they are making sure that hard to abate industries are also at the forefront of climate action. We know that for the next many, many years, hydrocarbons, the hard to abate industries, they will still be relevant because they are linked to the development of countries' geographies. The interventions, they need to come in at every level. That is extremely important. If it's, say, steel manufacturing, cement manufacturing, all of this is needed for infrastructure. How do we bring in more appropriate interventions so that the operations become cleaner? How do we utilize the resources that the earth brings to us? At the end of the day, the resources are finite. I think the understanding of this is very important, and that brings to the concept of circular economy. So various countries at their higher strategic plans, they are looking at this. In terms of the energy transition, I think that when we talk about that, the affordability, the security, and sustainability, these are the three key pillars. And these are also sort of, energy is a driver for economic growth. When we talk about, say, at the individual level, I think awareness, that's of course is extremely important. And every individual can really make a difference. So from the perspective of bringing in sustainability conversation and the sustainability lens right at the governance level, then at the strategy level, then at the management, at the operations level, then ensuring that it sort of goes back into the monitoring of it. There is assessments done, there are monitorings done, and then to readjust the plans and then go with more improved implementation. That's very important. So no industry, no geography, no tier of an organization stakeholder should be out of the ambit of this sustainability and climate conversation. And once these plans are made, whether at a country level or whether at an organization level, they need to be implemented in a manner that they have, say, a long-term approach. In short term, yes, we can get some outcomes, some results, but this is a journey. It is not just a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan. The global population is increasing by many folds. Our country is also a big contributor to it. At the end of the day, we have limited resources. We will keep on augmenting to our challenges and problems. Countries, geographies, they need to think in a collaborative fashion, in a collaborative manner. A challenge in one part of the world is actually a challenge of the geographies far away as well. So I think collaboration is something that we need to also bring in at the forefront of every conversation.
No, thank you, Ala. Thank you very much. Just to let you know, and I'll pick up on the circular economy and come back to you again. Ayla mentioned that the challenge of a one geography is a challenge for other one. Just to give you one example, any like whatever we are emitting through using the fossil fuel in a car, after 7 minutes, that's basically around the world. So anything which happened in Islamabad today, the smoke we have emitted today in the morning, it's already part of the global atmosphere after 7 minutes. So that's one thing. Second thing which Ayla picked up, that we have to collaborate. And I'll give you the example of contradiction, and I'll come back to some of the questions, and we will be asking some question here. Every 30 seconds, we waste 12 ton of food, and 12 ton of food is good enough to feed 30,000 people. And the same 30 seconds, 2 people die from hunger. So even within this age and connectivity, this is a contradiction which we are living in. So it's a distribution of the resources. It's not only the availability of the resources. And I think another point which is important to understand, Earth has a capacity, practically unlimited capacity to absorb the carbon, but there's a process. So it's how we are emitting, at what velocity we are emitting the carbon, and how Earth are basically absorbing that carbon. I think the difference is the timing of the process. And that discussion is not new. Like Ala mentioned, it's even 3000 BC in the history, there was a discussion that deforestation is going to impact the overall communities there as well as the environment. So this is not something new which is happening. It's just that we are becoming more aware, and this is squarely hitting us on today as we speak today. National Adaptation Plan, coming back to that. I think if we go back to the National Adaptation Plan, Farooq Saab also highlighted, the one thing, we can have a plan, we can also do the community engagement, we can go to that level, we might collect the data. And now we come to the execution, and this, just to give you a one number, and we have to see how we are going to implement that. Just the transition from a fossil fuel to a greener fuel, we need $4 trillion every year till 2030 to hit our net zero target. $4 trillion. But at the same time, if we do that, we will be saving $4.2 trillion on a climate damage which it may cause. So there is a offset, but amounts and the numbers are so big that Ayla like mentioned the collaboration side of it, how we can create that circularity where whatever we are generating, we are really absorbing it back and reducing the waste of that waste as well. Coming back to doing that, if we even talking about energy transition, and the amounts we are talking about are quite large, and Pakistan in NDC is committing 50% renewable energy by 2030. How we can raise funds, where that money will come from, and donors are not going to support us because there's no returns. We can have some money, but there has to be more coming from a commercial side, which make commercial sense as well. So starting from your side, Ayla, and I think that's a one common question, and then we will come to the audience for more questions. Where you feel that money is going to come to support our national adaptation plans?
Sure. Thanks, Sajid. Sajid, I'll just use the analogy that you gave with regards to that. Actually, it's not really the shortage of resources, it's the distribution. So when it comes to this morning, I was listening to one of the analysis on Bloomberg that Russia and Ukraine produces 25% of world's wheat. And it's not that the world has shortage of food. It is just that It is not that it sort of gets to everywhere because of various reasons, because of supply chains, because of logistics, because of XYZ, and maybe a bit of politics as well. But coming again back to the financial resources committed are absolutely huge. The number committed to climate resilience, the climate capital in Glasgow during COP26 was $130 trillion. This is committed capital. Now, what we need to do is we need to present projects, we need to present governance, transparency, and a framework around these investments so people can come in and benefit from it. And this is not aid. This is actual commercial capital, private capital, of course, supported by some philanthropics, some blended finance as well. There's a lot of great work that is being done by international financial institutions, by DFIs, etc. There is at the same time a lot of appetite by funds, by providers of commercial capital, private capital. What at our end, say in a country like Pakistan or any emerging or developing country, what really needs to be done is to provide documentation, transparency, framework, and of course, something that we can do in terms of providing a little bit of stability, and all the good that comes out of this. At the same time, all what we are going through, while it is extremely challenging, there are huge commercial opportunities as well. And I think we should have a great focus on that.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Thank you. Hassan sir.
I think while we talk of, and since you've asked the first question on China, I would again go back to China and the kind of resources that we can get through some of the initiatives that Chinese are taking. We've been speaking about BRI for last over 10 years now, but I think now we should more focus towards, and in terms of environment sustainability and what China is doing and some of the other countries are doing. I think the Global Development Initiative that China has just announced during their CPC meeting, and the Global Security Initiative that they've announced, and they're linking environment to security, is the kind of discussion that we should also have in Pakistan, and perhaps looking at these initiatives and some of the ones that Ayla has just referred to. How can we prepare ourselves well and talk to the global institutions who are actually now concerned about environment and also concerned about climate change and its impact in countries like Pakistan? Because whatever happens and the devastation that it brings, it also has its bearing on security. And that security cannot be limited to Pakistan alone. It will have its impact on other countries and neighboring countries. China realizes that. They're working on Global Development Initiative. I think our scholars, our think tanks, our government should also focus on that now. Look at possible deliverables that we can take to these forums and initiatives, and perhaps leverage from that. If we do not prepare well today, we are planning to fail, I think.
So capacity to prepare the business case and collaborate there.
And setting up projects with set deliverables and targets.
And ROI. Yep. Shahzad sir. So where that money can come?
There must be, government should see how they plan for first of all, the adaptation plan, as we have already discussed. And they must see even the funding, and also not only from the commercial side, for although which they have the non-profit organization and philanthropists, which they have some restrictions here, but we should see, and other countries also are ready to fund us, but that is in some proper plan, and if its implementation is done in a proper way and in transparency. The major problem we are facing here, the information and with that reporting should be in a transparent way, and they get their reliability from the rest of the world. And in this way they can get. Otherwise, the major problem here is, and the rest of the world is due to our some information and transparency issue, they are reluctant to funding the Pakistan and other regulators.
Great. So transparency reporting, governance, that's an important element really to build that trust to attract that money. Avid sir.
You see, when it comes to financing, and that's where I'll uh, need the attention of ACCA and ICMA and other accounts professionals. There's no dearth of money, but what sort of money is kosher for environmental projects? How can we avoid greenwashing in the name of private investment? That is a question which is now disturbing many of the climate change activists and environmentalists. For example, is it okay for a fossil fuel generating company to come and invest in some green projects in other countries? Will it be a sort of reparation of what they have been doing to climate at one hand and then investing in some green projects? The second thing which is important in this context, and Secretary General of the United Nations has been highlighting it very vocally during last few months, where he says that global financial system has got rotten and decayed, and he highlights that the IMFs and World Banks and ADBs of this world, they are climate insensitive. Even in COP27, one of in the declaration, final declaration, the 200 member countries, they stressed upon international financial system to be more climate responsive. Now, if green financing is coming to countries like Pakistan, but then it's coming on the terms and condition on which we access the multilateral grants, it would be simply inaccessible for us. So we need to design new ways of doing business. Of course, one needs to have access to loss and damage fund. One needs to have access to green climate fund, but not on the terms and condition on which the access to IMF funds or World Bank funds are made. So this access has to be more climate responsive. And I can give you the in Pakistan. Pakistan was not able to, we may have certain loopholes on our side as well, but we are not able to sell that floods in the revised macroeconomic framework that we are negotiating with the IMF. So financing is not the problem. The problem is how we can make this international financing more climate responsive, and how that international finances, they can be responsive to the vulnerabilities of developing countries.
Now, very rightly picked up the capacity to understand what to sell. And I think the greenwashing is a very interesting area to watch. And we have seen bigger fines in Europe very recently, whether it's a food companies or a financial institutions. So we will come to that taxonomy. I'll pick up that question from audience as well. Bilal, final words on the financing, and then we open up conversation with the audience.
Yeah, it is indeed a complex challenge. I mean, while some big numbers are always floated around when it comes to climate finance, and sometimes, from billions to trillions, I think the most reliable number which we have, they come from CPI, or the Synthesis Report on Climate Finance. And the Synthesis Report basically says $680 billion per annum. Around that figure, ballpark figure, actually is a flow from developed countries to developing countries. But when we actually break down the numbers, actually it comes down to something very interesting, which is not really viable in many sense. I think when it comes to the adaptation, I just want to highlight, and which might be a very relevant for this audience, adaptation finance is particularly challenging, because mitigation, there's always a service or an output or product at the end of the pipeline. In adaptation, the service, output, benefit, or whatever you want to call it, that might be decades away, and it becomes extremely difficult and challenges for the private sector finance to actually attract into that kind of investments and project interventions. a number of new initiatives are being undertaken, and I think the global international standards bodies and accounting bodies, I think they have undertaken the work which is under environmental accounting, green accounting, where the adaptation benefits need to be accounted for as well. And some monetization value need to be attached to it, not in the extremely long-term basis, but in the short term as well, or specialized benefits incentive has to be created in the short term basis. I think that work is very, very important, and that need to be kind of further strengthened. Secondly, I think once again, the bankability of the projects which we are preparing, I think that's extremely important. If we talk about GCF, and there are many other funds, although the GCF had the $100 billion commitment, and in all its entire history, they have only been able to mobilize 12 point something billion dollars. And out of that, Pakistan, or many countries like Pakistan, has been able to achieve not much. And to some extent, it's a complexity on the other side, but I think lack of capacity on our side is also a very genuine issue.
No, thank you, Bilal. I think you picked up on.
I would say that we must have the security, confidence, reliability of data, and information is required for all these finances, either from the inner side or from the outer side.
No, definitely. I think you picked up earlier right as well. The transparency reporting and the validation of data is an important element. Before we sum up, any question from the audience side, if we can take one or two questions. Uh, Anybody with mic? Do we have a mic? I think you can start your question. I hope we can hear you there.
Bilal sir, that could you just be kind enough to highlight on some of the projects example that you mentioned are being done? Because at the ground level, and even having a passion for this area, I think a lot of people, they don't have the right direction and awareness as has been highlighted. So if I talk about an example, and it's also a suggestion there, that a lot of innovation work should be encouraged in Pakistan at the basic level. For example, in Japan, they really nailed the water conservation. So they have a wash basin over a tank of a flush where you wash the hands, and that can be reused as well. So these are some basic steps that we could incorporate, and everything speaks over there that it's an emergency created, and it's subtly, people are incorporating in their lifestyles. So if you could be just kind enough to highlight on some of the examples, and also on what awareness projects are being done as well. Thank you.
Bilal.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll completely agree with you. The innovation, and I think we should say the lack of innovation, which is very persistent in our country. And I think this has to be supported, and our institutions like us should actually support the other academic institutions and many other institutions who have to come up with the right kind of approaches, methodologies, as well as the technologies. This is a very wonderful example you actually mentioned in Japan. And these kind of things can be done in Pakistan as well, but it's just like the kind of awareness is not there. I would say that sometimes is kind of our casual approach is also a big hindrance in this direction as well. So I think the academia and the research institution, the engineering institutions, they have to come up with these kind of solutions. Similarly, the research institutions like SDPI and many others have to come up with the right kind of approaches that the benefits reaches to the communities. The kind of intervention of the project which we have done, I have to be frank that we haven't really gone to that kind of level. Our interventions have been a lot more kind of broad, but strategic nature. So we have actually worked with the communities as well as the government institutions in the regions and the provinces for typical disaster risk reduction interventions like flood controls, early warning systems, climate smart agriculture practices, and rescue 1122, a number of other interventions like this, which of course have their own value. And the kind of challenges which Pakistan is facing and is going to face, unfortunately, the role and the scope and the potential and need for these kind of intervention is going to grow. But at the same time, we shouldn't be losing sight, and we should prioritize these kind of areas as well. I'm sure that the kind of emergency or the kind of situation or the awareness which is going on in the country right now, I'm sure that the academic institutions, research institutions are gearing up towards that direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Bilal. Very quickly, then we could.
Yeah, I think on the level that you've highlighted and referred to Japan, and perhaps looking at all the Confucius societies, I just have one point, and they look at it in a very philosophical way and in a very structured way. I think for them, in terms of implementation and looking at the challenges, they put the society and culture on the top tier, followed by the government and followed by the private enterprises. I think we are missing the first tier on our implementation canvas unless we do not incorporate and understand the challenge actually, and it's leading to our extinction. And if we do not understand to this diversity that it will bring, and the challenge and the security challenge on the cultural and also on the society level, government and private enterprises will come later, I guess.
Thank you. Very well said. And I think it goes back to Isla's point of circular economy, reducing waste. Whatever we can recycle, we have to rethink and just make sure that we are recycling that. Any other question? I saw hands there. Yeah, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Esteemed panel, thank you very much for your conversation. I'm a UK citizen. I'm also based in Pakistan now. And I was looking at the outsourcing journey for Pakistan, seeing as I've seen so many different nations evolve their economies into a service-based economy. And I feel that the skills gap in Pakistan is tremendous. The skills gap is not only the educational side, it's also the vocational training. What do you as a panel see as the most effective route to bring our population out of the doldrums that they're currently in? Number one, I can say that in terms of reducing the carbon footprint, remote working has been taught to us by force through the result of COVID-19 and its repercussions. Is there any overarching strategy that the ACCA, the ICMA are working on or looking at to bring that utility and value to the population?
If I can pick on a ACCA behalf, and then you can. I think if we go with the fundamental, and I think you referred Hassan Saab right now, the book which is Principle for Dealing with the Changing World Order. I think the significant things start from education, and the robust education system there does not mean that you are getting degrees. It's a skill side of it, it's a civil society understanding of it, and it's a work ethic. So these are the three things which put together create that education system, which leads to the innovation and intervention and economic output and the competitiveness and all the way down to the reserve currency. So these are the 8 key pillars. So I think if you look at the fundamental side where we are not doing very well, it's definitely, anybody can understand, it's the investment in the education system. But I think there is an individual responsibility as well. Anybody who's above 12 and have access to the smartphone, they make their choices what they're going to watch and how they're going to plan their way ahead. So I think it comes down to the community. Again, the one of the basic unit we were talking about, how communities are feeding these individuals who are empowered through that technology to define what to develop in terms of their professional skill side of it. From an education side, if you ask ACC has developed a lot of courses and the content which is available either as a paid one, but there's a lot which is available as a free of cost resources. 155 reports have been issued on sustainability alone. 155 research reports, which touch from a very specific accounting standard side of it and the reporting side of it, and goes to the how to build the smart cities and how to build the sustainable financial product side of it. So this is the content which is available. So when we look at the skill gap side of it, I think the biggest challenge we face, that how we compare as an individual, how we benchmark ourselves, and what our worldview is. If we start benchmarking, and just giving you one example, there was the person, I'll not name that one, and they were talking about we have got the best skill in the world. So my question was, compared to what? So unless until we start asking these questions to ourselves, I am a good or bad, compared to what? So what are the benchmark we are setting? I think that's a first thought process which has to be inculcated, that we start benchmarking ourselves in terms of where we are rated compared to the rest of the world. Like you said, remote work is best for the decarbonization. Maybe one thing, one mitigation act could be, because it's reduced the travel. But at the same time, are we aware that who we are competing with? That's mean we are competing with the rest of the world. And now we have to start comparing the talent in China, the talent in Vietnam, the talent in US. They have an equal opportunity. So do we. It's just that who does it first, starting from that basic question, compared to what? I am the best compared to what? And how I can improve myself because the content is available. So I think these are a lot of awareness which ACCA brings to the table, including the resources which are accessible. And sustainability is one of a key area which is embedded in the course, as well as with the CPDs, and when we are talking about the research side. So that's very well incorporated and available free of cost. It's a very valuable resource. I encourage everybody to look at that. Shazad Sab, if you want to add something.
Yes, as Sajid Sab explained, and we are also on the academia side, we are providing not only the professional education to our graduates, but we are also working for their entrepreneurship, and also for these, that best data is available. Either our R&D department is working there, and we have the best, like to have a faculty and the regular in Pakistan, not in Pakistan, but now we are also have some other country like UAE, UK, and Australia. We are working there, and also with the help of data available everywhere, we are trying to give these information to our community, our graduates, and also members, with the help of either seminars, webinars, and all these are helpful. And now they depend on the other side of the table, what they want. They want to, if somebody want to learn, then everything is available. And if otherwise, then it's difficult to teach him. Thank you.
No, thank you, Shazad. Abid Sab, I understand you want to leave. Just final comments from your side, and then we will come back for another question.
Your question, and I echo what Sajil just said, this fourth industrial revolution is an entry point. This all work from home, reducing our carbon footprints, and imparting the skills which are needed in the new future of job. It all depends on how quickly we can reduce our digital divide. So while we have income divide and all other sort of disparities, we also have this digital divide in Pakistan, and we need to work upon it, so that those who are deprived from digital access, they are provided digital access, and they are also provided with some responsibility guidelines. So if we can hone their skills for the future, we can also reduce our carbon footprint, and we can make them an important part of our human resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Abid Sab. If we can have a 1 minute, like a 30-second comment, closing comment from everybody, then we can have a ceremony, and in a minute or two, we will let you go. Abid. Bilal Sab, just 30-second, quick. And we will have this question answer session on the networking key, and further on the lunch side as well. Bilal Sab.
No, I would like to, I would like to thank everyone for the questions, and thanks to ACCA. I think it's a wonderful opportunity that the global bodies like ACCA are coming forward. They have a huge role to play, and we from NDRMF side, we want to partner with the ACCA. We are actually working closely, and there's a lot you can actually impart into our work, and that's what we look forward.
Shazad Sab, final words.
Finally, I must say that again, as the opening remark for speakers, that we should jointly work for it. And actual what is going on. We wait for it. We should see what is in the rest of the world, and then that should be implemented and suggested to our, policy makers and the government, especially I'm talking about the both institutes, and that should be implemented into shape. Then it would be a better, and they can realize over it, and its awareness is very much necessary.
Thank you. Hassan sir, final comments.
I think I would put a phrase on this. I think it does not matter how fast you're moving as long as you're moving and you're moving in the right direction. And I think Pakistan is moving in the right direction. But on the question that you asked, sir, I've been working with the TEFTAs and on the provincial and federal levels vocation center. We are far, far, far behind to the level that we should be. And I would encourage all investors to come help the government to build our vocational centers. Private sectors are okay. I think accounting side is okay, but I think on the hardcore pivot sector, the government needs huge support. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I think the future economies look very different. The future of work is very, very different. The future of learning is going to be very different. We need to have now practical demonstration of actually smaller projects leading to bigger projects. And everybody has room to contribute and collaborate. It's just that we need to get our minds to think in very different, innovative manner, and everything is possible. And at times we get stuck because we are wanting to have an intervention from the policymakers or from somebody. I think we need to just work at our own level, and then of course then and do collaborations and see what can we do, what is the change that we as individuals can bring. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayla, and thank you, everybody. Thank you very much for that, and thank you for listening and asking questions. I'm sure there are more questions we will be dealing during the networking session. Just to make sure that we understand just to summing up the conversation, National Adaptation Plan is an important one because that set the priorities and direction. Financial resources are available provided we have a capacity to create a business case. So we should not be looking at the donor money. We should be attracting the commercial investment, whether it's a recycling of plastic or whether it's a transition of energy. Transparency reporting is an important element. Community level is the most important thing where we should start and where we should be focusing, because that's the unit where we have to empower them and learn from them. And these are the ones who create the biggest advantage for the community themselves. And a lot of things goes back to the basic circular economy. Don't waste, and make sure that we are changing our individual behaviors for that matter. So thank you very much, and over to you, Javed.
Thank you very much, Sajid, for bringing to us a very productive discussion today, and thank you to all the panelists. So I would now request Asid Hamid Khan, Joseph, and Asad Malik and Haroon Ahmadjan to join us on stage for a group photo, and then we'll do a memento distribution. Gigi. Ji, please, if I may request the panelists to for a group photo. Asad Malik, if you can join on the stage, please. Okay, may I request Sajid, Asad, and Joseph to stay on stage, please? And we'll do a little memento distribution right now, starting with Abid Qayyum Suleri. So if we can have the memento for Abid Qayyum. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us today. Next, can we have the memento for Ayla Majid, ACCA Vice President? Thank you, sir. Ayla Majid. She's down there. Can we have the memento for Shahzad Ahmed Malik, President of ICMA Pakistan? Dr. Hassan Daud Butt. Thank you very much, sir, for gracing the occasion today. And Bilal Anwar, CEO of National Disaster and Risk Management Fund. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much to all the panelists of the first session. Now I'd like to thank you, Joseph, Asad, and Sajid, for your presence on stage. Now I'd like to introduce our guest of honor. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce Zishan Sheikh, Country Head International Finance Cooperation, Pakistan, who's going to share with us his profound knowledge, and we'll get a closer look into investment opportunities for climate action. Zishan Sheikh is the IFC Country Manager for Afghanistan and Pakistan with a background in public-private partnerships and innovative infrastructure investments across the Middle East and North Africa. He has been with the IFC since 2010 and is a qualified chartered accountant from PwC London. In his new role, Zishan aims to mobilize private sector investment across key sectors in Pakistan and Afghanistan. So this is a subject of deep interest for almost all of us in audience today. So let me call upon Zishan Sheikh, Country Head, International Finance Cooperation, Pakistan.
Can you hear me okay? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zishan. I head IFC for Pakistan and Afghanistan. I've been in this country about 7 months in this role, so it's a pleasure to be here. I want to begin by thanking Asad Khan and ACCA Pakistan for the opportunity to speak, and also want to extend a warm welcome to you, Joseph, to Pakistan. So I was asked to speak a little about climate finance. And what are the sort of opportunities, challenges as we see them. So I thought I would begin with a bit of an overview of what IFC and the bank is doing and the World Bank Group is doing in climate finance, and then talk a little about the Pakistan context and some of the opportunities as we see them. So I will try and flick through these slides relatively quickly. Okay. So just a 30-second overview. Some of you may or may not be familiar with IFC. So IFC is one of the 5 organizations that comprise World Bank Group. So there are 5 entities within that. The first one is what you call IBRD, which is essentially a public sector focused entity. All their lending, all their support is for the public sector. The second entity in the group is IFC, which has the same development objectives, but essentially driven via private sector-led development. So IFC is the largest global IFI focused specifically on private sector-led development models. Then you have IDA, MIGA, and ICSID. MIGA provides political risk insurance, so some of you will be familiar. IDA is essentially a large platform for donor funding to IDA countries, which meet the criteria, and ICSID essentially is a dispute resolution platform. In Pakistan, the bank, IBRD, and IFC have significant presence. We have, as IFC, about 50 people in the country. We've been in operation in Pakistan for almost 60 years. Quickly to tell you what we do, we are investors, like I said, across all sectors. We have four main verticals in manufacturing, agri, financial institutions, infrastructure, and what we call disruptive tech. And within that, we can invest across the capital structure from equity, loan. We do a lot of advisory work, as well as some of the stuff we do on project development. A cross-cutting theme across all of these areas is sustainability and climate finance, and you'll hear more about that as we go through the process. Just to give you a sense of what we do globally, we invest somewhere between $20 to $25 billion a year, all through the private sector, across developing countries. We only work in developing countries. In Pakistan, we have a current portfolio of about $1.5 billion. And a big part of what we do is climate and climate oriented. To share with you some numbers on climate, in the last 5 years, IFC has invested over $40 billion globally in various forms of climate finance. In the last year alone, we had around $8 billion in climate finance. So it makes us one of the largest, if not the largest, investors in climate finance globally, particularly in emerging markets. So back in 2021, we had come up with a what's called a climate change action plan. It was put out as World Bank Group, and it really focuses on various aspects of what is needed to try and improve investment flow towards climate change. And there are 5 buckets to this, and we'll talk about this in a bit more detail in later slides. But essentially, it's around agri, water, food security, then energy, a transition towards renewable forms of energy, both in terms of energy generation as well as transport-related battery storage and the like. On the transport side, there's a big push for moving towards non-fossil fuels based forms of transport. In manufacturing, you heard the panel speak earlier, lots of things going on in terms of resource efficiency, circular economy, blue economy, etc. And the final piece, which is also relevant to Pakistan, is essentially improving the sustainability of urban infrastructure. So Pakistan today has 40% of Pakistan's population lives in cities. It's going to be about 60% by 2050. So urban, dealing with sustainability challenges in the urban centers of the world, including in Pakistan, is a huge priority for us globally. How we do this, I won't go through all of this. I'm happy to share the slides, but again, 2 or 3 big things. There are 6 pillars of how we do this. A big part of it is around support for policy reforms. So what is needed to essentially put the right framework in place, and again, the panel earlier was discussing, to encourage investment in climate finance, both in adaptation and mitigation. We also are working on helping develop a carbon market, and there are various initiatives ongoing, including in Pakistan at the moment on this, which we feel is something that is important to encourage more sustainability of investments in this space. The third big part is in terms of mobilizing private investment to come into this space, and that's where IFC really comes in. Our entire ethos is about encouraging private sector to come into this space, making it more sustainable and making it viable from a financially investment perspective as well. And then the final part of it, which again I'll come on to in a second, is around blended finance, which is something that is a peculiar issue to a number of countries in the world, including Pakistan. Pakistan does not have access to the same level of concessional finance as some other parts of the world do, and there are various reasons for it. And again, the panel before me spoke about that, but this is a huge issue if we are really to scale up the sustainable private investment in climate. As IFC, we have some very sort of ambitious goals in terms of what we replicate in every country of operation, including Pakistan. 100% of what IFC does is what is called Paris aligned. So there was a big agreement in 2015 amongst countries of the world called the Paris Agreement. And so the idea is that every single investment that IFC does globally is Paris aligned, and that's also the case with all our investments in Pakistan. The second part of what we do is essentially improving or increasing flow of private capital towards mitigation and adaptation. And again, you heard the panel before me speak about the difference between the two. Both are equally important, but the reality is globally only 2 to 2.5% of all funding going towards climate resources is going towards adaptation. Everything else is going towards mitigation, even though there is, is there a way to fix this? It's not my phone, I don't have a phone on me. So even though the need on adaptation is significant, given the challenges of what we see in Pakistan. So for us, trying to encourage greater investment in adaptation in particular is a key priority for vulnerable countries like Pakistan. To give you a bit of context on the Pakistan side, so the World Bank Group put out a report called the Country Climate Development Report, CCDR. Some of you may have seen it towards the end of last year. It basically projects Pakistan's climate-related challenges and opportunities and tries to quantify the impact in terms of economic development if Pakistan cannot start to invest in climate-related investment. So I think it's well known, Pakistan as a contributor to GHG emissions is 1% or even less. But as a effectee, it's amongst the top 8, depending on which data you look at, top 5 most climate vulnerable countries in the world. The projections are that if nothing is done or not enough is done to mitigate the risks that climate change poses Pakistan, the impact on its GDP between now and 2050 is likely to be around 18 to 20%. So it's a huge number when it comes to the likely impact of not investing in climate-related initiatives. Some of you may have seen this. The floods last year were a huge reminder for all of us as to the reality of what climate change is doing to Pakistan. The number in terms of the total loss and damage done to Pakistan from the floods was $30 billion, about 10% of GDP. The needs for investment are 16.3 or $16 billion or so, and they're spread out across various sectors. And as you will see in later slides, the need for investment to mitigate what is happening is multiple folds of any money that any public sector or any donor agency in the world can raise for Pakistan. As part of the CCDR, we came up with some recommendations on what can be done or should be done to promote climate finance, and there's a couple of buckets, and again, in the interest of time, I won't go through this, but essentially what it says is that agri-sector, resilient urban infrastructure, and a move towards renewable energy are 3 key priorities, or should be 3 key priorities. And really the need in terms of enabling this is around human capital development, i.e. capacity building, which is also something that was mentioned in the previous panel, as well as strengthening some of the governance around these things, putting out clear policies to encourage longer term investments, since a number of these invest spaces require longer term view on investments. Let me move to the next slide. So this is an interesting slide. It basically is an output from the CCDR report, and it quantifies the investment needs for Pakistan related to climate between now and 2030. And the number that they've come up with is about $350 billion between now and 2030, of which roughly half is for adaptation and half is for mitigation and decarbonization. These numbers are so huge that, again, like I said, any amount of public money, any amount of donor resource will be a drop in the ocean. So really the purpose of this slide is to show you the scale and the urgency of what is needed. I will skip this. This is essentially some suggestions that we put out in terms of what is needed to encourage the sort of investment. But really, it boils down to having the right incentives from a policy perspective, encouraging more blended finance, and encouraging making these investments viable for the private sector. So you don't have to do it just because It's the right thing to do from an environmental perspective. It's the right thing to do from an economic perspective. And that's really the only way to scale this up. Okay, so in the final part of the presentation, I'll talk to you a little about what is happening in the climate finance space, some of what we're doing. Sorry, I realize my time's up, but I'll go over by a few minutes. So the whole story of climate finance, sustainable finance is not new, right? So this lays out for you the various standards that have been put out over the last 20 years. Actually, it's missing some. In 2003, IFC helped put together what are known as Equator Principles. Some of you may be familiar with those. Several things have happened over the years in terms of green loan principles, green bond principles, impact investing principles. The most recent one, also missing from this, was last year. We put out what is called blue bond principles. So principles for financing in blue bonds. These things are important to try and mitigate against some of the risks that the panel was talking about around greenwashing or blue washing. These put a standard to what is essentially what should qualify as a green loan or a sustainable loan globally. Several benefits of getting into this space, and again, I'll skip over some of the detail, but essentially what financing in this space does for you is that it opens up pools of capital that are otherwise not available to you. That's a huge advantage. The second part of it is that it allows you to put positive financial incentives for people to do the right thing when it comes to climate or SDGs, sustainability linked loans. It also is a way of mobilizing various risk mitigation tools through donors and the like. And actually, depending on what you're doing, it's also a way of raising cheaper capital. So there are many benefits to this. There's a lot of detail, but since I'm out of time, I'll be quick. This slide summarizes the three main types of climate finance tools that you see across the world. There's a big bucket on green finance, which includes green loans and green bonds. It's the biggest part of what happens in climate finance. There's about 400 odd billion, and this number is also now a couple of years old. There's a lot happening in the developing world, but it's really primarily China, India, and Latin America. Pakistan to date has only issued one green bond, and which was by WAPDA in 2021 for $500 million. In our conversations with several of the corporates in Pakistan, particularly those that are servicing the export industry, we're encouraging a lot of people to get into green loans and green financing and trying to capacity build. Sustainability linked financing is another very interesting product. What this does is it links the financial cost of your investment on a particular loan or a bond to your ability to meet certain KPIs that are agreed as part of your loan agreement. And what it does is it links the KPIs to SDGs. So there are 17 SDGs, as I'm sure most of you are aware. You can pick under which SDG, and then they range from water to hunger to food security to agri to renewable energy, et cetera, et cetera. So you can pick within the various SDGs which of the sort of SDG is most relevant to your project or your financing. And then you agree certain KPIs that I will reduce or I will increase water supply by X% by X year. And what it does is it says that, okay, if you're able to hit that KPI, the cost of your financing goes down. So say you have a 10-year loan, I agree a KPI with you that in year 5, I will reduce my water usage by 20%. If I hit it, the cost of my 10-year loan, which may have been SOFR plus 5%, will probably step down to SOFR plus 4%. So it's basically adding a financial incentive to do things which are relevant under the various SDGs. For me, if I'm honest with you, my personal view is that every loan in Pakistan should be a sustainability linked loan. There is so much to do here in the SDG space, and it gives you a lot more flexibility when it comes to devising your KPIs versus say green loans, which have a very sort of stringent requirement. So in all the conversations again that we have with corporates and others, and including banks in Pakistan, we're very keen to encourage sustainability linked financing, and it is something that we hope we can do. Climate transition is the final part, and again, it's relatively small, but just to share with you for interest. A lot of countries and a lot of companies are struggling with sort of this transition to net zero. So what you do is you agree a transition, a roadmap towards being climate accredited. And the idea is that the proceeds from these loans help you in that transition. So you agree use of proceeds of these fundings, which are very clear and measurable. It's a relatively small part, but an important part, again, for a country like Pakistan, which can't go from 0 to 100 in one go. So it requires a transition. So there are the three main buckets of globally what we're doing. In Pakistan, we are having, like I said, a number of conversations with people on the top two in particular, on sustainability and green finance, and we hope that's something we can develop further going forward. I will skip this. The only idea here is around the need for blended finance. There is a lot of blended money available, as also was mentioned by previous speakers. The issue, though, is Pakistan has not been able to attract anywhere near what it deserves in terms of the needs. And part of it is global priorities. So I'll give you an example. In my previous role, I used to look after what we did in Africa as well. There is so much donor money that goes towards Africa. They have an absorption problem. They don't have projects to absorb the amount of donor money they get. Whereas countries like Pakistan and others struggle with getting anything from funds like GCF and others who have a lot of money. But again, various reasons as to why this is. So the only message on this slide for everyone is that, and I say it in every conference I go to, be an advocate for blending finance. In Pakistan, it requires a lot more support. We do it, and we encourage the government and private sector counterparts to also do it. I'll skip this and go to this slide. This is an example of some of the stuff we've done globally, and many of these things are relevant to Pakistan in climate finance. So a lot of people think climate finance essentially is around, solar panels, but there's a lot more to it. And if I look at the screen, everything from so obviously scaling solar is something we've done in Afghanistan, in Africa. But if you look at water, the work we've done in Brazil with Sabesp, which is the largest water utility in the world, is around water sustainability, encouraging that. There's a lot of work that's gone in the circular economy. We issued our first blue bond in Singapore last year. There's a lot of work in terms of green buildings, and that's another big agenda item for us in Pakistan. We talked about urban infrastructure, cities like Lagos, Sao Paulo in Brazil. Many of the countries in Latin America is the most urbanized continent in the world. We're doing a lot in that space and would love to see that replicated in Pakistan. There's a lot of investment in R&D going into battery storage and green hydrogen. And actually, we are in conversations with someone in Pakistan to try and set up a green hydrogen plant, which would be fantastic, and I think would be something that can be replicated. And then again, on water in Corsa in Brazil is something that is quite relevant. Lots to be done in Pakistan in the water space. For us, we're active in all these spaces. We look forward to engaging with everyone in the room and beyond. In all the key sectors I mentioned, lots of investment, lots of capacity building needed for IFC as well, the World Bank and other IFIs involved in the space. There is a desire to do it, but it is difficult and will take some time. I will finish with a final thought. I think over the years, every generation has had a challenge, and I think for this generation, really the challenge is about, and especially those that work in the developing part of the world, the developed world has had its development and gone through this phase of growing their economies and growing their GHG footprint. There is a very direct correlation between economic development and GHG emissions. However, countries like Pakistan and others that are now trying to get up the development curve have a challenge as to how they can be economically more developed. They can achieve the same levels of economic development as the developed world, but at the same time, they don't have the luxury to be able to go free for all when it comes to GHG emissions. And that, for us as an institution, is the largest challenge we see globally for our generation, as to how do we get developing countries up the development curve without compromising on GHG emissions and at the same time working on a more sustainable form of economy for them. So I leave that with you. It will take people like those in this room and others to take this, and we hope that Pakistan can also go down this road in terms of sustainable development. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Zishan Saab, for that very insightful presentation. And I'm sure it answers a lot of questions that our audience had from the first panel discussion. So you can get in touch with our guest of honor, for more details around these areas. And it is definitely wonderful to have endorsement of IFC on Pakistan leadership conversation by ACCA Pakistan. May I request Asid Hamid to come on stage to give a memento, and Ayla Majid to give a memento to our guest of honor, Zishan Sheikh, Country Head, International Finance Corporation, Pakistan. Thank you very much, sir. And it's a pity that we were limited by time, but I'm sure we can have a more detailed, separate session on investment opportunities for climate action. Round of applause, dear audience. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Asid and Ayla. Shaping the future in uncertain times, we've talked about adopt a lot. Let's talk about learn and thrive, because the future depends on the next generation. And it is imperative that the accountancy profession works together with all our stakeholders to adopt an open perspective and multiple strategies of diversity engagement to attract new talent, ensure future growth, and solidify succession planning to create pathways for the next generation to remain relevant to the global workforce of tomorrow. So our next segment is all about upskilling future-ready talent for sustainability. To deliver the keynote address, may I call upon Zuhair Khalik, founder and general partner, Team Up Ventures. Zuhair Khalik is a 38-year veteran in telecom technology, operations, strategy, and board governance. He's the founder and general partner at Team Up Ventures, a venture capital fund that invests in startups in the MENA plus T region, and co-founder and partner at Team Up at NIC. It's wonderful to have you here with us today. Please join us on stage.
Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. First of all, thank you, ACCA, Sajid, Ayla, Asad, Fahad, all of you for giving me the opportunity to come and talk here. We'll talk a little bit about how, before we talk about upskilling, what's driving this? It's really the fourth industrial revolution that we're talking about here, Industry 4.0 as it's called. And there's a lot of scary terms in there. There are terms about, Internet of Things and industrial Internet of Things and machine learning and artificial intelligence, etc. And it's all a little bit daunting, a little bit scary. And we need to come to terms with all of that. And a lot of companies, a lot of businesses obviously are facing that challenge and thinking how we need to make it better. What I'd like to do here today is make sure that before we get too excited about the technology, every piece of technology, ladies and gentlemen, in the end is basically comes down to the workforce, which are humans, you and I, okay? And their empathy, their creativeness, their ability to be intuitive and interpret what's coming from technology is what drives everything. Now, and that's where the crux of the matter is. A World Economic Forum report in 2016 suggests that 65% of children going to primary school today, by the time they're ready to join the workforce, they will be facing jobs which never existed at this point in time. Another forum report says that 85 million jobs will be displaced because of technology coming in and taking part in the human interface, as it were. The same report says there are going to be over 97 million new jobs created, which never been heard before. So, and some of them will require, a lot of them will require upskilling, reskilling, training, and so on. So I wanted to share these very large numbers with you because, of course, these are numbers based on the rest of the world, but they will affect us here in Pakistan as well. And then question is, what are we doing about it? And are we preparing ourselves for what's coming? So some of the top skills that we're talking about are obviously about innovation, which I can been involved with for the last 6-7 years now in the National Incubation Center. It's about active learning, it's about critical thinking, complex problem solving, and skills in self-management, such as stress tolerance and flexibility. Now, some of those are very, very relevant after the couple of years of COVID restrictions and lockdowns and so on as well. And again, the question is, are we doing anything to address those issues? And I think the panel will be the forum where we will address some of those issues. I just want at this point to raise some of these issues, highlight them to everybody, and see how we can address them. The bigger question is, what are we doing in Pakistan about all of this? And that's $1 million, maybe $1 billion question at this point in time. And I think that's where we need to focus a lot. A lot of the skills acquired over the years are as I said earlier, being replaced by, can be acquired now, sorry, on things like YouTube and other channels and just the internet in general. Unfortunately, in our country at this point in time, and I'm going to put this out there because I want to use this forum to have this message out there, our policymakers and our regulators are actually doing the very opposite. They're actually trying to constrain the growth of the internet to the common man. Only 40% of Pakistan today has mobile internet connection. Less than 3 million people have landline connections on internet. And that is a huge, huge concern. And before we even go into upskilling and learning, this is where it all starts, because this is the real crux of what will actually enable this to happen. It's not going to happen in rooms in universities and schools. It's going to happen over the internet for a lot of these people. And our regulators, again, are focused on banning YouTube and Wikipedia and stuff like that. So there's a lot of rethinking that needs to be done at this stage. Whatever conversations we have today, I think will be great, but I think this is an area which needs to be brought into the overall discussion and dialogue if we are to get anywhere in the future with any meaning and any purpose. Now, we need to analyze also the role of our universities, and there are people here today representing universities, and we will be talking to them as well, and our corporations. Every time I talk to a CEO or a senior representative from one of the big business houses or corporations, their constant refrain to me is, we can't find good, trained people. And my question to them is, whose fault is that? Whose fault is that? I'm a product of ICI PLC, which till recently existed in Pakistan, and of Motorola Inc. From the USA. And I can tell you from the day I was there to the day I left in each of those organizations, I was trained. I was trained again and again and again. And the proof of that is today, if you look around Pakistan, a significant amount of the chief executives of very big corporations in Pakistan are former ICI employees. I was one of them, okay? Similarly, Citibank and Bank of America invested a huge amount into their people to be able to enable them. And a lot of the bank CEOs of banks today are those very people, okay? And when I was heading Mobilink, we trained, again, the heck out of people, okay? And the proof, again, is that they are all over the world today making us proud, whether they are in the Middle East or in the US or Canada. One of our very bright young ladies is the Chief Digital Officer of Digicel in the Caribbean. Okay, just to give you one example. Another lady who was trained at Mobilink over the years is now running the most successful healthcare business in the UAE. And she's just been named as amongst number 9 in the top 100 most powerful women on Forbes' list. It doesn't happen by accident. It happens through a training with a good plan on how you produce people. And that's what upskilling and future training is all about again. I was recently in Saudi Arabia, good fortune to attend something called the MISC Forum. And I went after 52 years, by the way, so and I was more than 10 years old at the time, so just revealing my age here. I was blown away. What are they doing? What they're doing is they're actually, with a very concerted effort, they are, through each of the universities, they are making sure that their people are acquiring the skills that are required by industry. So they talk to industry regularly, industry talks to them, and so there is a very good match where everybody who is coming out of university is immediately being absorbed into a job profile. And I think that's something that's hugely missing here. We've had many tries at this over the years that I've been back, and there's a lot more to be done in that respect as well. So again, something I'm putting out there for a bit of thought, I think. We need to declare a national emergency, ladies and gentlemen, in Pakistan for education and upskilling and training. We are woefully behind, and we need substantial rethinking if we are to get there today, in a few years' time. Otherwise, we endanger ourselves even more than where we are today. I want to thank you again for listening to me, and I'm hoping we can address some of these issues in the forum that we have to follow after this. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Zuhair Saab, for that insightful conversation. And I'd request you to join us on stage because the audience would like to hear a little bit more about the topic from you. So if I can invite you over for the panel discussion as well as a panelist. So in your round of applause, Zuhair Khalik, founder and general partner, Team Up Ventures. I'd also like to invite our moderator, Alexa Greenwald, Chief Strategy Officer, the Centrum Media. In your round of applause, once again, dear audience. Alia Zafar, Group Head HR, Bank of Punjab. She's also the first female independent director on the board of Pakistan Cricket Board. Ghazinfar Azam, President and Chief Executive Officer of Mobilink Microfinance Bank. Samia Kamar, Director and Country Lead for People S&P Global. And our moderator would be moderating the panel discussion on upskilling future-ready talent for sustainability. Over to you, Alexa.
Can everyone hear me?
I'm really sorry to have missed Sir Faisal Mushtaq. Sir Faisal Mushtaq's the CEO of the Millennium Universal College, a great educationist of Islamabad and Pakistan. Thank you very much, Sir Faisal Mushtaq, for joining us on stage. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I would like to welcome all of our panelists. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I would just like to open the session with a few of my thoughts. I first came to Pakistan in 2017, and so I've now been working here for 6 years. And one of the first things that struck me, and I was impressed by, was how enthusiastic and driven the young people of Pakistan were. And I think this is a huge asset. But as has been mentioned by our keynote speaker and a member of the audience previously, there is a very significant skills gap that needs to be addressed. So as I see it, there's a huge demand, and we need to work on the supply side. I was so impressed by the desire and hunger amongst many of these young professionals to grow in their careers, to learn new skills, and to be adaptable. I work for the Centre Media, and we are a group of 4 media and communications companies. And we have a lot of young professionals who we develop training modules for. We invest quite a bit in their professional development. And so this topic is really near and dear to our heart. And I actually want to say that upskilling is not that difficult to do. As I've said, there's a hunger, there's a need for it, but it's really about how we do it, right? So we've seen a huge expansion of online courses. We've seen a huge expansion of entrepreneurial thinking entering into the most mainstream sectors. Because there is this willingness to not just think in a 9-to-5 corporate model anymore. And so the question now is, how do we increase the supply? And this is what we're going to be talking about on our panel today. What skills are most needed in the market? What do young people want most? Like, what do they really need? How do companies define what kinds of skills they need to drive in their workforce in order to drive their own performance? And what capabilities do companies have in order to invest in these upskilling initiatives? Because as we know, this is not, there's resources that are needed to do this. And what other relevant players in the ecosystem can support these initiatives, like the startup ecosystem, financial institutions, and organizations like ACCA. So these are the questions we're going to delve into on our panel today. And just to get started, because I think there's a lot to talk about today, we have one of our panelists who has a tight timeline. So I'm going to start with Mr. Ghazenfar Azam, and I'm going to direct 2 questions to you, and then feel free to leave us when you need to. And then I will address the other panelists afterwards. So Mr. Azam, the first question for you is, how can banks and other financial institutions leverage upskilling programs for sustainability to drive performance within their finance companies, specifically around environmental, social, and governance performance metrics?
Yeah, I hope it works. Yeah. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I think part of the answer was provided by Zohair when he was talking about whose responsibility is it to train people in our businesses, in our companies. And the answer is companies themselves, by and large. And as a result of COVID, I can share you my own experience that we increase spending on training and development of our staff by around 10 times when other people were reducing expenses on training, development, and education. So this year, it will be around 9 to 10% of our expenditure will go to reskilling people. That's one area. So we take this responsibility that no one else is going to develop our people. We need to do that. The second is how to actually increase women's contribution within the organization and outside the organization. So for within the organization, what we have done is that we accepted the challenge of increasing diversity. And in the last 2 years, we have increased the number of women in the organization from around 17% to 23%. And I think we are still far away from the true balance that we need to achieve, but we are on the right, way, and then strategy is there in place to actually continue to make progress every year. The third is how to actually bring, if we link them to SDGs, that women is one of the diversity, gender is one of the major issues if we want to have sustainable development. So we reach at the conclusion that this is an area where we cannot do everything as an organization. We need to partner with a lot of other organizations. So we started our, my friend from marketing is here, Ali sitting in front of me. Our marketing team started looking at possible partners. And we established a couple of institutions within the institution, I mean, which was, one was WIN team or WIN program, which was only looking at possibilities that we could explore with partners. And CARE International is one of those institutions that came on board, the very first one, with whom we have trained about 1,000 new small business entrepreneurs, women. And we are helping them actually to not only just do their businesses through the traditional means, which is their own stores or workplaces, but also get registered with entities like DRAS and others to have their businesses go online with unlimited possibilities. So I believe women is an area where if we focus, all of us, and work together, we are working with other partners also to how can we reach out to other businesses that have similar aspirations. So I think women and their productivity unleashed is one area which will help us in future to actually optimize productivity. One major area which everybody is talking about is digital. So our goal as an entity, as a small institution, actually was basically to use the power of telecom connectivity to actually broaden the base of financial services in this country. And in this environment where stagnation is there, there's a doom and gloom global, particularly in Pakistan, there is an economic crisis. But I can tell you very happily that at least in financial services space, we have made a major headway. The financial inclusion used to be at about 12% 10 years ago. Now on the savings side, it has reached about 60% of the population. And on the borrowing side also, we tripled the number of borrowers in Pakistan in the last 10 years. The overall number is still around 10%, which is, you can imagine what it was when we started off. We are doing digital lending now, which people can avail in small and a push of a button. Normal bank loan was a nightmare for people to actually access. It still is in many ways. So I believe we have made some progress. And going forward, we have strategies in place of to upskill our people, how to partner with other institutions, and we can make progress on all of the three areas that I mentioned. One of them is upskilling people, second is empowering women, third is using technology for financial inclusion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very clear. My next question would be about the indicators of success that you've had so you really invested quite a bit in your own workforce. You said you engaged women, increasing the number of women working. You have focused on digital trainings. So what are the key indicators of success of this investment that you have put in these different areas?
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. So what are the key areas of success that helps you know that these initiatives that you are driving are working for your company?
I mean, the results are in all these areas. How many people we have trained basically for, because the nature of the roles have changed now within the organization. Many roles have become redundant. And new roles have been created. For instance, in branches, we have been progressively reducing the number of people on the operations side and putting them on customer engagement side. So for us, that's a huge transformation, which is complete only in part because the process is still on. My idea is that as per global best practices, we need to have minimum people in a branch which looks after this operations, and then the rest technology should be able to support. One or two facilitators in a branch should be enough. But the rest of the people who traditionally used to be in operational roles now need to go out and meet with people in the bazaar and in the communities and increase number of customers that we acquire. So if we look at the number of people that we now acquire in terms of new customers, that has increased manifold. So all of the targets that we set for ourselves annually, even despite COVID and everything, we have been overachieving them.